Hello and welcome to one more not real episode of the ABC podcast. My name is Alex and I am not joined by anybody today. It's just me flying solo again. But that's okay. It's like that sometimes and I'm good with that in this instance. So I know I haven't done one of these in a while. I kind of gave up on them because I didn't really know if they were getting a lot of good reception. It's kind of a lot of work for me, and I don't have a lot of free time to edit these anymore, sadly. So I kind of just let them fall by the wayside, but I wanted to do this one because I had been watching this very weird string of cartoons. Well, one of them's not a cartoon, so I guess just shows. And I had some thoughts, and I kind of just wanted to get them out there. So without any further ado, I will get into it. I forget what the last thing I talked about was. I don't even remember, but I recently rewatched the 2002 animated He-Man series that I've talked and gushed about on this show many times. It still continues to be great, and I highly recommend it. But I was riding the He-Man high, and then I watched the She-Ra show. Oh, that's right. I spliced it into the last episode that I recorded with Brandon like 8 months later or whatever. Talked about all that. So I watched She-Ra and I was just on this Masters of the Universe lore kick. And I wanted to keep it going even though there wasn't really another show for me. I mean, I could have watched the original He-Man series, but I'm over that one. So I decided that I was going to watch the Thundercats cartoon because I've never seen it before, and they are technically related. There was a 6-issue miniseries about Masters of the Universe versus Thundercats, I think was the title. I'm sure they teamed up at some point, but I haven't read it, unfortunately. I went to go see if I could grab it from a local comic book shop because it came out a couple years ago, and I didn't know, how far back they would carry issues, and they didn't have it. They told me to go on eBay, and I want to get it at some point, but I haven't yet, just because, money is a hard thing to come by. So anyway, point is, they're technically related, and I thought, I'll give this a shot. So Thundercats is a cartoon that debuted in, I believe, the late 80s, about a bunch of cats. Premise is that the nobles of the planet of Thundera, evacuate their home planet of Thundera because it's exploding. And so several of them, I'll name them all, but I'm not going to try and count them all right now. I'll name them all in a minute, Several of them get onto a ship and they skedaddle as they watch their planet explode. As they are leaving, their ship is attacked by a group of raiders that are referred to as the mutants, which is basically just a bunch of bad guys, thugs, that come and do thuggish things. So they get attacked and they manage to fend them off, but they damage their engine or something like that. Anyway, so they get away and they're headed for a new place to live, which they ultimately land on Third Earth, but it's far away, and so they get in stasis pods, all good sci-fi series have, except for the eldest Thundercat named Jaga. He has to stay there because the autopilot was damaged in the attack by the mutants. So he gets it. He takes a little wake up. It's kind of like I think it's an undetermined amount of time, but probably about 10 years later, because the main character, Lion-O, goes in as a cub and comes out fully grown. That's a whole other thing. It's never really explained why, because no one else does, including there are 2 other characters who are younger, called the Thunder Kittens, and they don't grow up for some reason. It's the whole thing. Anyway, they land on Third Earth, and they start setting up home, and they are attacked by this bad guy by the name of Mum-Ra the Everliving. He's this evil wizard who's lived on Third Earth for thousands of years, and he doesn't like the Thundercats because they have this powerful weapon called the Sword of Omens that has this jewel called the Eye of Thundera that does powerful stuff, and Mumra wants it for some reason. Like it's like it the eye does a bunch of different things, and he wants it to do things with. I'm not sure if it's ever exactly explained what he plans to do with it. So yeah, they're fighting against Mumra. The mutants show up on Third Earth and they align with him, and sometimes they work against him. They eventually run into this other group of bad guys that was on Third Earth, but like frozen or something, called the Lunatics. And there's a bunch of others, like weird random villains that like get summoned or whatever, come from space, what have you. And so that's like just the general premise of the show. The main Thundercats are, so there's the Thunderkins that I mentioned earlier. Their names are Wily Kit and Wily Cat. They're twins, boy and a girl. They're trickster people. That's like their main gimmick. They have like these like pellets that make smoke, and they have like bolas, I guess, is another thing that they do a bunch, and hoverboards. And yeah, they're like the least featured of the Thundercats. There's Cheetara, who is based off of a cheetah. She's the only female Thundercat besides Wily Cat. Yeah, Cat's the girl, Kit's the boy. Yeah, so Cheetara's the only female. She has a staff and she can run super fast, and she's okay. There's Tigra, who is like their like architect. He's like makes plans and designs things, and he has a whip that he uses, and he can also turn himself invisible. And also, in one single episode, never used again, he can create illusions with his mind, but it takes like such a toll on him that he doesn't use it that much. And there's Panthro, who is their like mechanic. So Tigra will like design the schematics, and then Panthro will actually build them. And he has 2 nunchucks. Wait, did I say Tigra's whip? I don't remember. Tigra has a whip, and then Panthro has nunchucks. And he also has these weird spikes on his like strappy chest thing that he can like do stuff with, but he doesn't use them very often. Oh, and then there's Jaga that I mentioned at the beginning. Like I said, he's dead, but he comes back as a ghost a bunch to just kind of check in and give them advice sometimes. And then later on, they introduced 3 new Thundercats. So there's Pumaira, who's, I guess, the other female Thundercat I forgot about, but she's like secondary. There's Linkso, who is blind, but he's like very wise, and he has like super senses, and he has this thing called a braille board that they built for him that can like basically help him navigate. So like he's blind, but he's almost like not even really blind. And then there's Bengali, who was like it's like a miner or something. I don't remember. He like he was a blacksmith. That's what it was. And yeah, so they just hang out on Third Earth. Eventually, Thundera gets reformed because reasons, and then they end up going back and forth between Third Earth and Thundera, or New Thundera, and eventually they just move back to Thundera altogether. Although they do go back to Third Earth a couple times anyway. And yeah, so that's like the main gist of Thundercats. And this is a very beloved cartoon for people who grew up in that era, which I did not. And so for me, coming in fresh with really no real preconceived notions, not like I didn't really know much about Thundercats at all, other than they were cats. It took me a while to get into it. And ultimately, like I liked it more than I did at the beginning. I wouldn't say it's like amazing. I wouldn't say it's like a must-watch cartoon. I don't think it holds up super well. Like a lot of like the animation's still pretty good. It's very cheesy, really. There's all the like you try to include like a moral at the end of every episode, or like kind of sprinkle it throughout. So that doesn't hold up too well. On a just base entertainment level, I guess I would say I liked it more than the original He-Man. Certainly the animation was better. They do try to include more story than I ever remember them doing in the original He-Man. They have a couple of good story arcs throughout. Most of the episodes are, one-off, just kind of fighting the threat of the week or what have you. But there's several good like most of them are like 5 episode like deals that I enjoyed. Those don't really come until the later seasons. But yeah, so like it did grow on me eventually. But what I was really excited about was there was in 2011 they rebooted it on Cartoon Network, and so that's what I was really excited about because it's a very similar situation to the He-Man cartoon. You know, it had its original run, and then Cartoon Network picked up a new series, and it had a good run that obviously I enjoyed very much after the fact. And I thought that the Thundercats would kind of go the same way for me. And ultimately, the reboot did not satisfy me. It was okay. Like it wasn't terrible. It didn't, make me hate Thundercats, certainly. But well, for one thing, it deviated from the origin story of the original Thundercats very significantly. The reboot starts out on Third Earth. That's where the Thundercat Empire always was. And it begins with Mum-Ra, who was gone for a long time. It basically become like just like a scary story you tell kids kind of deal. He comes back and he kills the king and he destroys their kingdom. And the main group of Thundercats, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to talk about Lion-O. I was talking about all the Thundercats. He's the main one, and I totally forgot to talk about him. Lion-O is the Lord of the Thundercats. He's the son of the original king, Claudius, from Thundera, and he ultimately, like, he was, like, inherited the title, but he also had to like earn it eventually, and he did, and becomes a very good leader. This is the original series, by the way. Becomes a very good and like noble and wise leader for the Thundercats, and he wields the Sword of Omens, like I said, and he's just like a really like good, wholesome protagonist, much like He-Man. So anyway, back to the reboot series. I forget where I was going. So he kills Mum-Ra kills the king, and Lion-O, Tigra, who is his brother in this series, like adopted brother, Lion-O, Tigra, Cheetara, and the Thunder Kittens manage to escape the sacking of the palace and get out and go. I forget where they're originally trying to go to. I guess it's the Tower of Omens. No, maybe that's later on. Or yeah, they're trying. Oh, the Book of Omens set the Tower of Omens. I don't know. Anyway, they leave the kingdom, and eventually they meet up with Panthro, who everyone thought was dead, and some things happen. So that's again just a real quick rundown of what happens in the reboot series. So they deviated very, very significantly from the original cartoon, and I wanted to like set it aside, like just say, okay, I guess it's like its own new continuity, whatever, but I just never could, because I guess I ultimately came to like how they portrayed the Thundercats in the original series, and I just didn't feel like they did justice to that in the new series. Lion-O is much younger, much more hot-headed. He's like doesn't really know how to use the Eye of Thundera and Sword of Omens, and he's always butting heads against Tigra because they're like brothers and they're rivals at the same time, and there's this whole love triangle between the two of them and Cheetara, and there's just like a bunch of stuff that I didn't really care about. They're trying to find like the other jewels of Thundera or something. I forget what they're called exactly. They're like Infinity Stones, and they all like if you collect all of them and you wield them in this claw shield, exactly like the Infinity Gauntlet, you become super powerful. In the final episode of the season, Mum-Ra gets 2 and Lion-O gets 2, and they both get these like armor things, and they battle it out. They each have a sword and everything, and I don't know, it was just like, it just didn't do it for me the way that the He-Man series did. This series was much more story focused than the original Thundercat series, which you would think would, knowing me, would have made it a lot more appealing for me. But for some reason, the story just like didn't grab me. It didn't draw me in, and just it just didn't work for me. And that was really disappointing because I really wanted to like it. It's 26 episodes long, I think it was, and they did not get like a final conclusion to the story. I guess, yeah, let me go ahead and say it. So they meet up with Pumaira, who I mentioned from the original series later on in the reboot. They meet up with her, and she helps them out, and she helps them get into like Mum-Ra's base or whatever, I forget exactly. Or no, they're on the Sky World. So she helps them out, and then at the end it turns out that she had been working for Mum-Ra all along because she actually died when the Thundercat kingdom was attacked. She actually died, and as she was dying, she saw Lion-O and company leaving the kingdom, and she called out for help, but she was really weak, and so she couldn't call that loud, and so they didn't hear her, and so she blamed them for her death. She thought that they should have protected the kingdom from Mum-Ra's attack, which is just the stupidest logic. So anyway, so she dies, and then Mum-Ra manages to like bring her back to life, and then she like pledges her allegiance to him. He actually, he forget exactly what he says, but he made it sound like they were like a couple, which is really just gross. But at the very least, she was his, servant and working for him, and so she managed to steal something from Lion-O right at the end, or like take him, like keep him from battling or something. I don't remember. So yeah, I thought that was a really stupid twist. I didn't like it. Pumaira in the original series was not a very important character, but she wasn't evil for sure. She helped out the Thundercats, whenever there was trouble. And yeah, so I thought that was dumb. And yeah, I was just disappointed in the whole thing. So that was lame. While I was watching the original series, like I said, I wasn't super into it until later on, and well, I wouldn't even say I ever got super into it, but I eventually started enjoying it more. Oh, other thing I forgot to say, theme song, quite good. If you've never heard it, I would check it out. It's definitely better than the He-Man theme song anyway. So anyway, like I said, I wasn't getting into it, and so seeing Mum-Ra, who is a mummy, and he lives in a pyramid and everything, made me think about this other cartoon that I used to watch called Mummies Alive, which I've talked about on this podcast before a long time ago. Not super in depth because I didn't remember it that well. So watching this and watching Mum-Ra made me think about that, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll try and watch that because I remembered it really fondly. I'll try and watch that while I'm watching Thundercats to try and watch, one thing that I'm not super into and that's super long, and I'll watch this, which isn't very long. And so I did. Mummies Alive, real quick story, is about this evil sorcerer named Scarab from ancient Egyptian times who's attempting to capture this kid named Presley, I think was his name. And he is like the reincarnation of the son of the pharaoh. Well, I guess he becomes the pharaoh, right? No, he's the prince. Yeah, so he's the son of the pharaoh, and Scarab thinks that if he sacrifices this kid, Amenhotep, I think was the prince's name, that he can become immortal. And there were four mummies who were assigned to, four people who were assigned to protect him in life, and they pledged themselves to his service in the afterlife. And so when Scarab comes back, they are reawakened, and they're there to protect him. So there's, oh boy, am I going to remember their names? Nope, I have no idea. Anyway, so there's the leader who is an archer, and he has the power of a falcon. There's the super smart one, or he's does magic and stuff, and he's builds their vehicles and stuff. And he has the power of a snake. And then there's this really strong one who's always hungry, and he only has one arm, and he has the power of the ram. And then there's the female who's their chariot driver, with the power of the cat, or the spirit, whatever, power, spirit, whatever. And so they're essentially Power Rangers. Whenever they need to go into battle, they call upon the power, no, with the strength of Ra. That's what they say. And they have these little amulets, and they do these cool transformation sequences that ultimately get very old because you see them over and over and over. And then they have like this battle armor, and then they duke it out, and they get back to their pyramid to recharge their energy in their sarcophagi. And that's the main gist of it. They encounter a bunch of other like deities and beings from ancient Egypt because, of course, set in San Francisco. And yeah, so that's like the main premise. This show is not great. It's fine. Yeah, it's like very okay. Like I said, I like the idea of the transformation sequences, the like powered up battle modes and whatever. Oh, they also have a bunch of like vehicles that are all like ancient Egyptian themed and whatever. I like the idea of all of that, but in execution, it's pretty rote. It doesn't really push the boundaries of storytelling or action or animation or anything. And not every cartoon has to do that, but if it doesn't do something like exceptionally well, like it's just not gonna really stand out. And I wouldn't say any of it did. My biggest gripe with the show was just the voice acting. I guess all the adults were more or less fine, but whoever they got to voice the kid, the prince, whatever, was like, I'm not trying to, knock him or anything, but his delivery was it was always very fast, like too fast, like he was like too eager to like get his lines out or something, and it just like kind of, that was very off-putting for me, and it just didn't really work out very well. So Mommy's Alive was, the main thing that carried me through it was nostalgia. If I'd never heard of the show before watching it and I decided to watch it, I probably would watch the whole thing because that's just how I am. Like, I don't really like to start something and then stop it. But if I had never heard of it and started watching it, I don't think I would have enjoyed it at all. So, it's too bad, but that's how it is. So that show was originally on UPN, which doesn't exist anymore. In Houston, it's now My20. I don't know what they call it in other places. And I mean, they used to show a bunch of shows on there, like cartoons and stuff. I remember that was where I watched Digimon back when that was, I mean, it's still a thing, but not as much of a thing. Anyway, so I used to watch Digimon Frontier that I really loved. They had Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century, some other shows that I watched. But there was one that I remembered in particular that I decided, I was watching Mommy's Alive and it's like, oh man, this really makes me remember this other show. Then I decided to watch afterwards called Ace Lightning. That was a mistake because this show is just total garbage. So Ace Lightning is about this kid from England named Mark, and his parents moved to America for a job. Side note, the show is set and filmed, is filmed and starring mostly Canadian actors. Set in Canada, starring mostly Canadian actors. You can hear their Canadian accents and everything. Everyone except for Mark and his parents are very clearly Canadian, but it's supposed to be set in America. Don't ask me why. So that was weird. So anyway, they move from England. They live in America. One night he's playing this game called Ace Lightning, and he discovers this secret hidden level. At that moment, his computer or his house gets struck by lightning, and that brings Ace Lightning, the main hero of the game and the show, to life, as well as the main antagonists of the show from the Carnival of Doom. And the objective that Ace Lightning, I guess in the game and then ultimately in quote-unquote real life in the show, is to find these pieces of this amulet. I think it has a name, I don't remember what it is. Find the amulet to restore it and get everyone back to what they call the 8th dimension. But, well, it's never really clear if the 8th dimension is actually real or if they are just in the game and they're like programmed to think that, they're from the 8th dimension. They kind of like hint at both being true, so I don't know. Anyway, so that's what they're trying to do. The leader of the bad guys is this skeleton dude that I'm totally drawing a blank on. He has this consort named Lady Illusion who ultimately falls in love with Ace Lightning, and there's like a conflict there. What is that guy's name? I don't know. I've just watched it like a month ago and I've already blocked it out because it was so bad. And then he has some lackeys. There's this giant rhino guy named Anvil, this pig dude named Pigface. He has a staff that like shoots like energy blasts or whatever called Staff. And there's this crazy jester guy named Googler. And then in the second season, there's a Walking Dead character, not a zombie. He gets very offended if you call him a zombie. And I forget what his name is too. And so they live at this carnival that's run by this dude that I forget his name too. And they set up shop there, and they are always trying to attack Ace Lightning and trying to vie for pieces of the amulet. Whenever they get a piece of the amulet, they can summon a new character from the 8th dimension to come help them in their cause. So there's two other... so Ace Lightning is a lightning knight. He has lightning powers, obviously. He just like shoots lightning and flies. I don't even remember if he has any other like powers. And he has to recharge himself at this like superconductor in this observatory. And there's two other lightning knights. One of them, her name is Sparks. She is a female who's very hot-headed and reckless, and that gets her into a lot of trouble a bunch. She has this flying machine because I guess she can't fly by herself, and she also has a lightning sword. And there's another one called Random Virus, who is like a cyborg. He has like a robot eye, and then I think a robot claw, and then his legs that are like caterpillar treads. And he is like infected with this virus, so sometimes he's good and sometimes he's bad, just depending on what the writers want to do with him. Yeah, and so Mark is supposed to help Ace Lightning. He becomes a Lightning Knight, or at least Ace makes him become one. And Mark's always like, oh, I don't want to do it. I just want to be normal and have friends, and this is too much work. And like his house is always getting blown up because the bad guys come to attack him. Oh, I forgot to say. So this show blends real life, so like human actors, and CGI, so like 3D animation, which is one of the weaker parts of the show. I mean, all the parts of the show were pretty weak, but at least in the first season. The second season actually improves it significantly, but still not great. Like, so Ace Lightning and all of the bad guys, they are all CGI, and well, for one thing, it doesn't look good. And I don't know, it was just like a weird choice for them to make. Like, it was a bold decision. I will give them that. I read on the Wikipedia page that it was the first program, or maybe even like media. I don't know. I don't know if that includes movies or not, but it was like on TV. It was one of the first to try and do that. Like, it was one of the most heavy uses of CGI at that time, and tried to blend like real life and computer animation, and not great. So anyway, I was saying his house gets blown up all the time. He doesn't want, like, he tries to like abandon his duties as a Lightning Knight all the time. Well, not all the time, but several times. He's just like, oh, it's too hard. And he's always like, a Lightning Knight never quits. And that's all he really says. Yeah, so the writing was really bad. Just like the story was, I mean, it's not a very complex premise, but they never do anything like super interesting with it, in my opinion. The writing's bad, the acting is bad, at least from all of the child characters, which is most of the cast. The adults are fine, but they're not in it too much. So yeah, just not a good show. Stay away. So after I watched all 3 of those shows, 4 if you want to count the 2 Thundercats series as separate, I moved on to another show called Silverhawks, because I found out on the Thundercats wiki page that Silverhawks is like a sister show of Thundercats. I don't think they're set in the same universe, but the 2 shows were made by the same production company, share several of the same voice actors and stuff, very similar, basically identical art styles. I'd never heard of it before. I'm guessing you'd probably never heard of it before, and there's a reason for that. And that would be that it's not a great show. It's not bad. It's very similar to Thundercats in some ways. So main premise is there is a bad guy named Monstar, and he has control of this gang that they just call the Mob. And when Monstar is exposed to the rays of this moon in the galaxy that they live in the galaxy of Limbo. when he's exposed to the rays of the moon star of Limbo, he becomes this very powerful robot person. It's weird. So anyway, starts off in jail and he breaks out in the very first episode by being exposed to the rays. He gets all big and metallic and he busts out and he reforms his gang and they go back to their planet, Brimstar. And the person who put Monstar in prison the first time, his name is Commander Stargazer. He calls out to Earth for help and he says, Monstar is out, things are about to get bad here, I need backup. And so they send this new team of people called the Silverhawks. So the gimmick of the Silverhawks is that they are partly metal and partly real. And I know that's a weird way to phrase that because basically that just means that they're cyborgs, but they never say that. They say partly metal, partly real a bunch of times. So they get these like suits of armor to replace some of their body parts, and they all have wings, and they shoot up to the galaxy of Limbo to fight crime. And yeah, so there's Lieutenant, oh my gosh, what is this guy's name? I don't remember. Lieutenant something. He's the main leader. Well, like he's Stargazer is in charge of them, but he's like the main leader of the squad. What is his name? Oh my gosh. His name's Quicksilver. So he's like the main leader. There's twins named Steelheart and Steel Will. They have like these telepathy powers. There's their pilot who is named Colonel Bluegrass. And he's like a cowboy and he has this like guitar that can like shoot out like music notes or whatever. And then there's this other, he's not human. He's like I think he's like an alien. They don't really ever explain it. But they just call him the Copper Kid. And he just like whistles. Like he can kind of talk sometimes, but most of it's just whistling. Like R2-D2. So they, go in space and then they're there and they just patrol the galaxy, whatever. Oh, I forget if I said this. The reason they're cyborgs, partly metal, partly or whatever, is because apparently you can't live there if you're purely organic. Or unless you were like born, I don't know, because like a bunch of the mob is like, they're not robots, but they're fine. So I don't know why humans can't be there. They eventually get a couple more people, Silverhawks, to come join them. One of them is named Hotwing, who is, in addition to having the Silverhawk powers, he's also a magician, so he does a bunch of like tricky magic stuff. And then there's a dude named Flashback, who has the power to travel through time. Because why not? And then there's also, already there when they get there, there's a actual hawk called Tallyhawk, who is a surveillance drone, also partly metal, partly real. And they just stop the mob whenever they're up to no good. So I'm not quite done with it yet. I have like 15 episodes left, something like that. I think a little less actually. And I don't know, like it's fine. Like it's not, terrible. Like I would put it, well, no, I would say it's lesser in quality than Thundercats. My main problem with the show is that all the characters are like basically the same. Like obviously they have different personalities, but in terms of what they are able to do, there's really not that much difference. Like Hotwing and Flashback are the most, well, I was going to say diverse, but then I realized that's not the right word I was looking for. But they also actually are diverse because Hotwing is African American. Well, if he's from America, he's black. And then Flashback, well, he looks white, but he has some kind of weird accent, so I don't know what that means. But no, they have the most like varied, like they can actually do stuff that the others can't. Bluegrass has his guitar thing, whatever, and he doesn't have the wings, but everyone else, they have wings and they have these little cannon laser things on their shoulders so that they can shoot while they fly, which is a good idea, but also it means that after they shoot on the ground, they have to like put their shoulder forward, like they're gonna like tackle somebody, and it looked kind of funny. But anyway, so yeah, they just like all do the same thing, which is just, it's kind of lame. Like, the great thing about Power Rangers is they all have a different weapon, they all have a different Zord, they all have a different whatever. In Shaolin Showdown, they all control a different element, they all have the different Shengang Wu. In Captain Planet, they all have a different element. In Mummy's Alive, they all have a different spirit animal, they all have different weapons, which I forgot to mention. But the Falcon guy has a bow and arrow, the Snake guy has swords, the Ram guy is just super strong, so he has a metal arm that he hits people with, and the cat lady has a whip. So anyway, back to Silverhawks. It just doesn't do it, like they aren't distinct enough to make it really interesting, and that's just boring in my opinion. Last thing I want to say about Silverhawks is that the physics don't make any sense. It's set in outer space, but sometimes they'll put on they have these little like visors that come down to cover their face when they're in space. Sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't, and it doesn't ever matter because they never asphyxiate, and they will often fall through space, which makes no sense. Especially because they have wings, and they have like rocket heel boots, and so they can literally fly, but they just fall all the time. So that's Silverhawks. While I was watching Silverhawks, I decided I was going to watch another show. Oh, I forgot one. Okay, so I also started watching... This was after I finished watching Ace Lightning. I watched the Mighty Ducks animated series. I'll make this brief. I watched it because Thundercats reminded me a lot of it. In the Mighty Ducks show, their planet gets taken over by these evil race of lizard people called the Saurians, and they form a resistance, and they fight back, and they blow up their tower, and they chase them off the planet, and the leader of the Saurians, named Dragonis, opens up this wormhole into another dimension that ultimately turns out to be Earth, and they follow him, and they get stuck on Earth. And so, like, that very basic premise is very similar to the original Thundercats series. And so I was originally debating between watching that one and Mummies Alive. I decided to do Mummies Alive first, and then I went to the Ace Lightning show, unfortunately. After that, I watched Mighty Ducks. I won't say too much about it. I enjoyed it. Again, a lot of that is nostalgia. I know objectively that it's not a great show. Definitely better than Ace Lightning. Probably better than Mummies Alive. It's a lot funnier, a lot snappier. They break the fourth wall a bunch, which, even though it made me roll my eyes every time, I also laughed every time, so that was funny. The animation was better, the voice acting was better, just all around, a just generally better show, but still not super great. But I enjoyed it. If you like just fun, it's 26 episodes, so in and out. If you just like silly cartoons, then I would recommend it. Anyway, while I started watching Silverhawks, I started watching another show that it doesn't have anything to do with Silverhawks, unlike the other shows that I mentioned being related to Thundercats. This was just the name. I started watching Stormhawks. Again, not quite finished with it. I have I think only 7 or 8 episodes left. Basic premise for Stormhawks is it's set in this world where everything is all living things, well, most living things live up in the sky, above the clouds. Everything below the clouds is this wasteland that people don't really go down into. And so there's all these mountaintop, they call them kingdoms. They're just their own islands, essentially. It's a lot like Skyward Sword, if you are a Zelda fan. So there's all these separate islands, but everyone has they've really developed their flying technology kind of out of necessity, I guess. So they just go back and forth, and there's this evil empire called the Cyclonians, very reminiscent of the Fire Nation in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and they're trying to just do bad things, take over the world, whatever. And the main characters are this group of, they're not really a military, but they are skilled in combat. And they oppose the Cyclonians. And so the main team is called the Stormhawks. There are Sky Knights, and there's, several different groups of Sky Knights throughout the Atmos. That's the name of their world. Yeah, so this follows the Stormhawks. There's the main leader named Arrow. There's the sharpshooter, his name is Finn. The strong guy / mechanic named Junko. The I guess kind of techie strategist who's also really good with these crystals that I'll explain more about in a minute. Her name is Piper. And then their pilot helmsman named Stork. And then there's this little rabbit ferret guy named Radar, who's the co-pilot. And the main really cool distinguishing thing about Stormhawks, the show, is that they have these bikes that can turn into flying machines. They're kind of like pod racers. I don't know. There's just a lot of desert areas that they end up driving and flying through, and it reminds me of pod racing for some reason. Yeah, so they have bikes that go back and forth. I know they have a name, and they said it the other day, and I was like, oh, can I remember that for when I record this? And I totally forgot. So that's on me. Anyway, so my thoughts on Stormhawks is it's fine. I really enjoyed the show back in the day. I think it was mostly on like when I was in either late middle school, early high school, maybe like a combination of both. I don't remember. I remember really enjoying it back then, mostly just the idea of like these flying bike jet things. Those I just thought really cool, like something I hadn't really seen before very much, and really liked that. The story is not great. I'm getting, like I said, I'm almost done with the series, and there are really like almost every episode will end with like a kind of teaser for something that like looks like it's building towards something bigger. So that's fine, but like just the main idea of this scrappy ragtag group of teenagers going up against this army of evil people is, it's been done, but I think it's fine. This isn't like the best iteration of that idea, but it's okay. And yeah, I mean it's fine. I don't really know what to say about it. Yeah. So that is all I have to say. This went on for a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but that always happens, so go figure. So yeah, those are two other real quick things that I want to talk about, not cartoon related. One, I want to recommend a sitcom from Comedy Central that just ended called Broad City. It's about these two girls who live in New York and they're best friends, and they get into these really wacky situations. And I know that sounds very generic, but I thought it's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. I've very, very much enjoyed it, so I would highly recommend that. I know it's available on Hulu and not on Netflix. I don't know about any other places, but I would check it out if you can. Other thing I want to talk about real quick is the video game Bayonetta. That was originally came out on the PS3. It might have been on Xbox, I can't remember. But they put it out on Wii U and then on Switch, so I have the Switch version. Playing through that right now. It's a lot like the Devil May Cry series. I don't remember if I've ever talked about that on the show before, but I played the first 3 Devil May Cry games. I don't like them. They're just way too hard for me. I'm not good enough to be good at them. Like I beat all 3 of the games that I played, but not very well. And I'm having the same problems with Bayonetta. It just feels very unfair. Like it's very flashy. The story's very confusing, but mostly I'm just getting my butt kicked by these waves and waves of enemies, and it's not very fun for me. So that's unfortunate. And that's all the things that I have to talk about that I've been experiencing lately. Okay, so with all that out of the way, it's time for a segment of Fan Fic Fights. So I have Robyn here with me.
Hello.
And also our son Benjamin. So if you hear a chewing or growling or screaming noise, that would be him. But hopefully he won't say anything. Yeah, we have a son, by the way. I never talked about that, but I'll address that at the end. So yeah, our fanfic fight this week is between... It's not going to be a fight, because that's how it always is with Robyn. We got to be more abstract. What? It's just the truth. So anyways, who is a better dad between Bob Belcher... Yeah, he thought that was funny. Between Bob Belcher and Stan Smith. So I'll let Robyn choose who she thinks is a better dad.
I'm obviously going to pick Bob Belcher, also because I've never watched American Dad, so there's that.
American Dad is a good show, I think. Like, I think that's kind of a minority opinion. I think people are mostly over it by this point, but at least the last time I'm a couple seasons behind, but the last time I watched it, I still found it very funny.
Well, I've never watched it, so I don't have an opinion.
I mean, you've seen episodes of it.
Yeah, but not enough to, have an opinion.
Okay. So anyway, Robyn, go ahead.
So, Bob Belcher, what can I say about this wonderful man that Lynn so much loves? Well, he is a great dad because he always takes care of his children, obviously, even though he works them at a young age, which can be considered child labor. But let's not think about that right now.
Does it really count if it's a family business?
I don't really know. You'd have to look that up. Anyway, he's always willing to be involved in his kids' things, and he's very involved in their personal lives, like keeping Tina on a straight path with her interesting boundary issues that she has in life. He's always looking out for her, and he's very involved in Luisa's life and always trying with her and with Jean. I don't really know what to say. He's just a great dad. I would say he's a great dad because he's very involved in his children's life, and he's very clear that he cares about them. He even cries sometimes and lets them make fun of him, which is what all great dads should do, is joke around with their children and not be too strict, but be fun with boundaries, obviously. That's all I have.
Okay, well, first I'll talk about why Stan is such a great dad, and then I'll dismantle all of Robyn's points that she made. So, Stan works for the CIA. He's an operative, I guess. It's kind of like back and forth. It doesn't make sense because it's a very like comedic show. So anyway, he works for the CIA, and he uses that to his advantage all the time. You know, he like brings home like inventions that they're working on this for the government, and he'll use them to like make his family's life better and stuff. And he uses his contacts to like spy on people for his kids sometimes. Basically, he is a very hard-working man, and he tries to provide for his family. And I think that's the hallmark of any great dad. And Bob, he's just hustling, trying to make his restaurant successful that he's usually unsuccessful at doing. He often cares more about cooking and making up punny names for his burger of the day than he does about taking care of his kids. Stan, meanwhile, he has 2 kids. There's the older girl named Haley, and then the younger boy named Steve. And Haley is very antithetical to what Stan believes in, and that they butt heads a lot, but ultimately, he still loves her and he supports her and lets her live at home with her husband. And I think that's a really great thing for him to do. It shows that he is capable of being the bigger man and saying, even though I don't agree with you, I still love you. And then Steve, he's always trying to form him to being the best man that he can be, showing initiative and being honorable and being, just generally a good masculine person in the world. And I think that's a very admirable thing for a father to do. All the things that Robyn said about Bob are, basically wrong. She said that he lets the kids make fun of him. No, it's actually because they don't respect him, and that's not cool. Both of Stan's kids respect him a lot, and they would never do that to him. So I think he's obviously a better father because of that.
So I'm going to counter that point. So you and I make fun of each other a lot. Does that mean we don't respect each other? I do not believe that is the case.
No, but we are equals, okay? They are his children. They should respect him, not tease him.
I make fun of my mom all the time.
Not in the way they do. Okay, but you're also older. The way that they treat Bob is extremely disrespectful. You and your mom is usually like joking way. They're just like trying to be mean.
Well, I also have a counterpoint when you said that Bob is always concerned about his burgers. Well, the kids do the burger stuff with him. Obviously, he has to make a living for them to take care of them. So him worrying about his burgers is worrying about providing for his family. And he has the kids involved with that. And that some of the punny things that they do, the kids do with him. And so it's a way for them to bond together. I think you're just salty because you don't have a burger shop.
I would not want a burger shop. And also, they hate working there. They try to get out of it any way they can.
Anybody would try to get out of working if they could. Because who likes to work?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If they loved Bob so much, they would do it because they love him.
I disagree with that point. I want to counter everything that Alex said because everything he said is false. But I also can't say that because I've never seen the show enough to know if it's false. But I'm going to say it's false because that's what I want to say. Ultimately, I am the best dad of all dads. That's my solution. I've been. Also, I realized as we were doing this, I feel like I'm taking a test. in trying to prove my point. And it's very anxiety provoking, considering I have a test for school.
Well, you're a good test taker. So anyway, that is what we thought, and we would love to know what you thought. So you can send us an email to abcpodcast92@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from you. So that is it for this quick little update episode. But I'm very happy to announce that I will be recording another one in just a few days, and I will be with Brandon in person, and we're going to be talking about Avengers Endgame. And I'm super duper excited. I can't wait to see it and then talk about it and record it and for all of you to listen to it. It's going to be super great. So, real quick, you can follow me on Twitter at AtariAlex. You can find Brandon's Twitter handle in the bio, in my bio on Twitter. And then you can also follow Robyn on Twitter. Just go on my timeline and scroll down until you see something having to do with a cat or a baby, and she'll be tagged in that. So, thank you all for listening, and we will catch you all next time.
Bye.